Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today's video will resume the series on learning and evolving from past practitioners. The practitioner that I will introduce today will be Chen Yingning, one of the most important Taoist figures in recent history and one of the greatest Taoist scholars, regarded by some Taoists as the modern-day Lao Tzu or 当代太上老君. But first, let's warm up with Dao De Jing commentary and 修道. Today's sentence is 常德不离 from chapter 28 of the Dao De Jing. At the beginning of this chapter, Lao Tzu used 3 sentences to express his philosophical beliefs to promoting 知雄守慈 or possess strength but retain gentleness. He said, quote, 知其雄守其慈为天下溪 end quote. Translation, be aware of what's masculine in you, but preserve what is feminine in you, and serve as a valley for heaven and earth. End translation. Here, Lao Tzu used the word 雄 or male, masculine to indicate strength, and the word 慈 or female, feminine to indicate gentleness. Then Lao Tzu said, quote, 惟天下溪常德不离复归于婴儿 end quote. Translation, if you become the valley for heaven and earth, you will be inseparable from the constant virtue, and you will return to the state of a newborn child. End translation. In other words, returning to the innocent state like that of a child is the ideal state of 常德 or constant virtue. The sentence mentioned at the beginning of this video, 常德不离, is from here. 常 means constant, 德 means virtue, 不 means without, 离 means separate. Put together, it describes an ideal state of following the great Tao. Then Lao Tzu expressed the same concept of the first 3 sentences using 3 new sentences. He said, quote, 知其白守其黑为天下事 end quote. Translation, knowing the white but keeping to the black is the model to the world. End translation. Here, white and black represent strength and gentleness. Then Lao Tzu said, quote, 惟天下事常德复归于无极 end quote. Translation, if you are a model for the world, the Tao inside you will strengthen, and you will return whole to your eternal beginning. End translation. Then Lao Tzu kept explaining the same concept in different ways by giving different examples in the rest of this chapter. In 修道, a lot of important concepts that have been used for thousands of years to guide the energy refinement process actually originated in this chapter, with today's sentence, 常德不离, being one of them. In the ancient 修道 practice, 常德 or constant virtue was used to indicate the practice of 凝神入气血. 凝 means gathering, 神 means spirit, mind, 入 means entering, 气血 means 气 cave, a term indicating the center of the lower dantian area. In Taoist practice, 气血is a key concept since it is related to the emergence of prenatal energy. Therefore, 凝神入气血 or gathering the spirit and entering the qi cave is the step to practice 修道. To do so, one has to work on it constantly. which Lao Tzu emphasized using the term 常德 or constant virtue. Constant virtue or 常德 can also be used in many other steps of Xiu Dao practice, since the meaning of this term actually expresses the concept of constant correct practice. Any Xiu Dao practice requires constant work in order to achieve the ideal result. The term 常德不离 from this chapter perfectly expresses this concept. Chapter 28 also contains many other terms that can also guide Xiu Dao practice. I will talk about them in the future. With that, let's get on with the main topic for today, the introduction of Chen Yingning. Topics covered in today's video include: first, who was Chen Yingning? Second, Chen Yingning's practice and teaching. Third, Chen Yingning's contributions. Fourth, misperceptions, and fifth, takeaways and inspiration. So, without any further ado, let's get started. Topic 1. Who was Chen Yingning? So far, I have introduced a lot of great martial art practitioners in this series. Today's video is the first to introduce a Daoist figure. Chen Yingning is an important Daoist figure in recent history due to his outstanding contribution to the promotion and dissemination of Daoist practice spanning over half a century, and his influence has only been growing with time. If we talk about Daoist practice for the last century, Chen Yingning is a name we just cannot ignore. Personally, I take Chen Yingning as the role model in the way he dedicated his life to Daoist practice and teaching during the beginning of the 19th century, a very turbulent time in Chinese history, a period in which many traditional and ancient Chinese cultural practices were questioned, neglected, and even abandoned. Through his hard work, many Daoist practices not only survived, but more importantly, also thrived in terms of wide accessibility to ordinary people. His contribution is phenomenal, and his name deserves to be remembered. That's why I chose him as the first Daoist figure to introduce in this series. Chen Yingning was born in 1880 in Anhui Province and passed away in 1969 in Beijing. When he was a child, he was always sick despite his family's efforts to help him survive. Even at a very early age, he was prestigious in grasping and mastering classical Chinese knowledge. He had an especially strong interest in studying Taoism and Daoist practice, which helped him become such an important figure in Daoist history. Since he was always very sick and many of his serious health issues had no solution back then, he began trying to use Xian Dao Gongfu, or Daoist immortal practice, to handle his diseases. With time and dedication, many of his health issues disappeared, and all those experiences strengthened his determination to devote himself to Daoist study and teaching. Especially in his 20s, after a few years of study in a modern school specializing in science, he realized that in order to cure all of his health issues, he had to study further. So he dropped out of the science program and traveled to many areas of China in order to study different disciplines of practice, including Buddhism and Taoism. Through his practice with the different teachers during traveling, he realized that Buddhism practice focused mainly on spirituality but not physical health. From then on, he kept his focus only on Tao's practice. Back then, there were not many experienced and knowledgeable Taoist monks in different temples, which made him determined to contribute his time and energy to study Daozang, the Taoist canon, the most important Taoist collection in history. By the way, the situation in most Taoist temples nowadays has remained quite the same. Religious Taoist practitioners in most temples, even today, mainly focus on Taoist religion instead of energy practice. Approximately at the age of 32, Chen Yingning started reading the Taoist canon, finishing the entire collection in 3 years. Since the Taoist canon is an extensive collection, there were only a few copies in China back in his time, and most people did not have sufficient time, energy, and resources to study them. Nowadays, people can purchase it and even read it online. Now, let me briefly introduce the historical background of Chen Yingning's time. Taoism had become more and more unpopular in the Qing dynasty. As an ancient philosophy as well as a traditional religion, especially after the Opium War, many dramatic changes occurred in the feudal society of China due to the impact of Western civilization, modern science, and technology. As a result, the foundation of Chinese culture was deeply shaken. However, some Taoist scholars, such as Chen Yingning, started applying different solutions to reform and innovate Taoist practices in order to carry forward the traditional Chinese culture by preserving and promoting ancient practices. In order to experiment with different practices recorded in ancient documents, he even spent about 10 years refining the external elixir. After hundreds of unsuccessful attempts and the breakout of different wars made him cease his efforts on external elixir refinement. So, from 1932, he shifted his focus from both external and internal elixir refinements to only internal elixir practice. This was an important step in his research and practice. By the way, what he did reflected the same process of evolution and development of the internal elixir practice that had been in continuous existence in history. In other words, he utilized different methods to test, verify, and experiment with the ancient practices recorded in Taoist documents through his own endeavors. A challenging task today, but even more so back in his time. In July 1933, Chen Yingning and his colleagues created Yangshan Banyue Kan in Shanghai. Yangshan means promoting benefaction. Banyue Kan means bi-weekly or fortnightly publication. Later on, in 1939, this journal was renamed to Xiandao Yuebao, or Immortality Monthly Report. Unfortunately, this journal ended its publication in 1941. During this time, as a major article contributor, Chen Yingning published a large number of documents covering Taoist history, practice, research, and so on. This book contains many important articles written by Chen Yingning. Every time I read his writings, even today, I feel very appreciative and grateful for his contributions. His contributions were even more valuable back then, since those teachings were not so accessible to the public due to the nature of Taoist energy practice. In the 1956, he was invited to be a committee member to create the National Taoist Association or 中国道教协会. Then, in 1957, he was elected as the vice chairman of the first National Taoist Conference in Beijing. Around this period, he published many documents to promote Taoist energy practices, such as 静功总说 or General Introduction of Quiet Sitting Practice. Later on, he was elected as the chairman of the National Taoist Association. As chairman, he dedicated his time to write articles and books to promote the Taoist practice. In 1969, he passed away in Beijing. So, from his late 30s until his final days, he contributed all his energy to researching, experimenting with, and teaching Taoist energy practices. It's even more noteworthy given the extremely turbulent period in recent Chinese history. All the writings he left behind reflect his phenomenal contribution to the Taoist community. Topic 2. Chen Yingning's practice and teaching. I was less than a year old at the time of Chen Yingning passing away. Obviously, I did not have the chance to study with him. However, I was fortunate to study in Beijing with Hu Haiya, his most important disciple. From the 1940s, Hu Haiya strictly adhered to Chen Yingning's teaching. Especially for the last 2 decades of Chen Yingning's life, Hu Haiya took care of him. Chen Yingning entrusted Hu Haiya with all of his documents before his passing away. Hu Haiya elevated my understanding of Chen Yingning's method to a whole new level. So, I have first-hand experience with Chen Yingning's system, which I will share with the community in the future. As mentioned already, Chen Yingning studied with many teachers and practiced many different methods. However, based on my research, in his later years, he mainly focused on northern, southern, and middle schools, which can be noticed by analyzing his writings published after the 1930s. He also studied TCM, or traditional Chinese medicine, and internal martial arts. His TCM practice especially helped him apply Tao's energy practice to help his patients recover from many chronic health issues. In his later years, with his students, mainly Hu Haiya, he developed 庄子听息法, or listening to the skin method of Zhuangzi, a method based on Zhuangzi's document. Please keep in mind that the name of this method should not be taken at face value. I will introduce it in the future. Chen Yingning used modern terms to explain the ancient practice. For example, he defined some key terms such as 性 or nature, 命 or life, and their relationships with the code. 性是人之灵觉，灵觉在于人心，命是人之生机，生机在于肉体，所以性命二者不可分离。End quote. Translation: 性 is the spiritual consciousness, and it is determined by the human mind. 命 is the vitality of the individual, and it depends on our human body. Therefore, 性 and 命 are inseparable, and both should be practiced together. End translation. This statement wonderfully explains the concept of 性命双修, or 性 and 命 should be practiced together, which is an important concept in Taoism. Chen Yingning emphasized the importance of practice instead of only learning theory. He said, quote, 若不做命功，决定不能长生, end quote. Translation: if one does not practice the 命功 or vital energy practice, one will not be immortal. End translation. At the same time, he emphasized 性功 of the practice of one's nature. He said, quote, 若心性修养不够，便不能修命功. End quote. Translation: if one's self-cultivation is insufficient, one cannot practice vital energy practice well. End translation. By the way, Chen Yingning has its own understanding and interpretation of the term immortal, which I will introduce in the next section. So, Chen Yingning focuses on his study of immortality, or 仙学, a term he created. 仙学, or immortality study, has become more and more popular since the 1930s, and now more and more practitioners are studying this system in China and overseas. However, 仙学 was not created in the void. Instead, it is the result of Chen Yingning's constant dedication and hard work based on thousands of years of history of Taoist energy practice. He was the most important person who revitalized the ancient practice at a time when those practices were at risk of disappearing into oblivion. Now, let's talk about his contributions to the Taoist energy practice community in the next topic. Topic 3. Chen Yingning's contributions. A stellar figure like Chen Yingning contributed an uncountable numbers of his endeavors to Taoist practice. It's very hard to list all of his contributions, but I will list some of the most important ones here. First, since he belonged to a highly educated family, his classical Chinese language skill had reached a very profound level. Being highly skilled in the classical Chinese language, as well as the only person to read the entire Taoist canon in the last 500 years, Chen Yingning was uniquely positioned to make authoritative commentaries and correct editing mistakes in ancient Taoist documents. Many Taoist classics available today were actually edited and commented by him, which is considered one of his outstanding contributions. Think about it. If a practitioner cannot understand an ancient document, or if a document is full of mistakes, reading those documents is not only pointless but may also be harmful. In history, when talking about immortals, it very often given people the impression that immortals are those who would never die. Well, Chen Yingning defined immortality as the result of the evolution of human beings. The immortals are human beings in an advanced state. In other words, humans are the carrier of immortals, and there will be no immortality without humans. He said, quote, 乃是精神与物质 混合、团结、锻炼而成者。End quote. Translation. Immortals are the integration of spirit and materials after being refined. End translation. So, the clear definition of immortal is the revolutionary concept contributed by Chen Yingning, a true innovation of redefining the key terms that had been used for thousands of years without a clear definition. One of the most important contributions of Chen Yingning was the concept and the practice of separation of the Taoist religion from the immortality study. In many of his writings, he mentioned that one reason for Taoist energy practice becoming less popular was due to the situation that religions such as Taoist religions and very often intertwined with energy practice. In other words, when talking about energy practice, religious terms are very often utilized. As a result, people got the impression that energy practice was a part of religion. However, the ancient documents related to energy practice contained no mention of such intertwined nature. So, the first thing Chen Yingning did was the separation of religion and energy practice. In other words, energy practice plus other related knowledge was given a new title, 仙学 or immortality study, a study based on experiment and practice, not based on religion. He said, quote, 凡宗教首重信仰，信仰者仰仗他力也。仙学贵在施政，施政者全赖自力也。所以神仙学术可以说是科学而非宗教。End quote. Translation. As for religion, it emphasizes belief, which is the power of others. However, immortal practice emphasizes practices. In other words, one's individual power, so that the immortality study is science but not religion. End translation. Here, Chen Yingning explained his concept of separation of energy practice from religion, which was a major milestone in Taoist practice. So, 仙学 or immortality study, a system created by Chen Yingning, was created based on many ancient Taoist systems to refine energy through a systematic way of study and practice. The system is simple yet very profound, aiming to improve the overall effectiveness and efficiency of the energy refinement process. Based on the 仙学 approach and practice, all the ancient practice systems can be analyzed and practiced according to each individual's situation. This is the most important contribution that Chen Yingning made in his lifetime. Topic 4. Misperception. Chen Yingning, a great Taoist scholar, practitioner, and key disseminator of the last century, gained respect in the community due to his practice and teachings. However, due to the misunderstanding of the terms immortal and immortality, some people say that his practice was not good since he did not become an immortal. Now, let me debunk it. First of all, the Taoist definition of immortal is not someone who will never die. We have to be able to differentiate religious stories from reality. Yes, Taoist history contains many stories about immortals such as 八仙 or 8 immortals. Bear in mind, this is only a religious definition of immortal. Philosophical Taoism and practice Taoism do not perceive the word immortal the same way as the Taoist religion. Again, an immortal in practical Taoism is the one who has achieved a certain level of practice through cultivation and energy refinement. The study of immortality is called 仙学 or immortality study. Yes, Chen Yingning passed away at the age of 89, and his main disciple Hu Haiya passed away just a few months short of 100 years. They may not be considered immortal according to religious Taoism for now, but who knows, after 100 years, religious Taoism may title them as immortals. So, immortal is a title given by humans, but not by the immortal himself or herself. If we consider the contribution that Chen Yingning made, he is immortal as he lives in our minds. We are the carrier of his spirit that Tao's energy practice will keep moving forward. Now, let's summarize his practice, contribution, and inspiration for future generations in the next topic. Topic 5. Inspirations. Chen Yingning has directly and indirectly inspired many people, including myself. Even though born into a Confucian scholar family, he focused on Tao's study instead of following the conventional learning and career path after studying the Confucian system. His family was against his decision in the beginning, but he was determined to devote himself to Tao's practice. By the way, as a sick child, he realized that the only way for him to restore his health was through Tao's practice. Eventually, he made it happen. Chen Yingning traveled to many places in order to study all the religious systems and spiritual practices, and experimented with many ancient methods in order to understand different ways to improve human life. Eventually, he shifted his focus to internal elixir practice and devoted the rest of his life to studying, researching, teaching, and disseminating the ancient Taoist energy practice, and making it accessible to everyone through different challenging endeavors in a very hard period of time in history. His contributions also enriched TCM practice by integrating two systems together. Chen Yingning left behind hundreds of articles, documents, corrections of ancient classics, and so on, an invaluable treasure for later generations. He also applied modern teaching methods to help his students, which made a quote-unquote secret in the old days accessible to the public. Especially starting from the middle of the last century, he created new methods based on ancient Taoist energy practice systems to help people recover from many chronic health issues. Many of those methods are in use even today. Before concluding today's video, I'd like to quote one of Chen Yingning's words, quote, 脱离尘世一切苦难，解除凡夫一切束缚, end quote. Translation. Immortality is a practice that helps us get rid of all worldly suffering and liberate ourselves from restrictions. End translation. Chen Yingning is an unavoidable name in the Taoist community, and I hope more and more people around the world will know about him and his method going forward. That brings us to the end of today's video. Thanks for watching. See you next time, and enjoy your practice.